have a good show today. Jen and Paul McCarter in the house. Community stakeholders.
Yeah, hopefully.
Good description.
That's how we see it, yeah.
Community stakeholders, is that fair?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, we're going to get an update on Mountain View Elementary in the 5th grade and the future of the 5th grade at Mountain View Elementary. Parents, if you want to chime in and offer some perspective, you know how to do it. Put it in the comment section, and we will relay the props and the praise and even tough questions, as long as they're respectful, to Jen and Paul live on air. I have a feeling you're going to have a lot of media watching you guys here. So media, I don't want to speak for you guys, but if you want to do a follow-up story, can they reach out? They can reach out to you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the TV stations that watch, the print outlets that watch, and the radio stations, this is something that is primed for the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock news and a front page story in the Daily Progress. Catherine Knott, front page story, Daily Progress. This follow-up is prime for you guys. J-Dubs, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Hello, Ray Cadell. Welcome to the broadcast. He has kind things to say.
I love Ray.
Yeah?
Ray and the Cool Cats.
Big Ray and the Cool Cats.
Big Ray and the Cool Cats.
J-Dubs, ball, we're in your hands, my friend. And happy birthday to Judah Woodcower. Today's his birthday.
Hey, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Why don't say?
Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love Seville show. Thank you for joining us. A humid and hot Tuesday in Central Virginia. Still a glorious day to be above the mud. We're live in Charlottesville, in Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, and the world on the I Love Seville network. Dr. Wagner, we're grateful for you being a part of the show. Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. Who's got your back? Dr. Wagner has your back. And also Ting Fiber Internet powers the network. Crazy fast internet, Ting Fiber Internet. A lot we're going to cover today. At about 1:15, we'll check in with Alex Erpy, CEO of Emergent Financial Services, to get a look at the market coming out of the 3-day weekend. The 4th was celebrated by Wall Street yesterday, but for the first 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes of the program, two people that are community stakeholders and have made their voices heard in strategic fashion to impact a school system that frankly needed some impact. Why don't we go to the studio camera, Judah, and let's welcome Paul and his better half, Jen.
Better 7/8.
Better 7/8. Same with me. Better 7/8. You heard that, Mrs. Miller. Better 7/8 to the show. Jen, we'll start with you ladies first.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having us back. My name is Jen McCarter. I'm a parent of 2 children at Mountain View Elementary. Have been pretty heavily involved in volunteering with the school for the last few years, and am excited for the future of the school.
And Mr. Paul McCarter.
The 1/8 of the relationship. Paul McCarter, also obviously parent of 2 kids, local realtor in the area, big supporter of Mountain View and Albemarle Public Schools in general. And we had quite the little, let's say, disagreement with the way the school system was doing some stuff with our rising 5th graders, and a bunch of parents, not just us, got involved to make a change. That's probably the best way to say it.
Why don't we start there? Give them the flip book of what happened.
So to give a Cliff Notes version of it, so about a month and a half ago, there was a announcement that it was highly likely, was the words that were used, that the rising 5th graders of Mountain View were going to be shifted to go next year to Walton Middle School, which caused some concerns in terms of lack of facilities for elementary school age kids, a longer school schedule, just a bunch of stuff that didn't really sit well with the parents. And a lot of parents stepped up and objected to it. The school board and Dr. Haas listened to those objections and created a working group that was made up of about 23 people, including parents from all the different grades, teachers, some community members, work through other options to see if there was a better option for us to do. The last school board, or the last working group meeting was last week, and the recommendation to Dr. Haas was to get a 6 to 8 unit temporary building, which hopefully will be a 2-year solution instead of a 1-year solution until that addition gets done. And then there's some adjustments that the school is going to have to do to survive probably the first month and a half of school until that new building gets put in, because they're projecting that to be mid-October. But yeah, so overall, I think most will consider it a victory. There's a vote that has to happen at this Thursday school board meeting. It's just a reallocation of funds. The picture painted to us is that it was just a formality.
And the school, they sent out a survey asking people their opinion. And I think looking at the results of the survey, the overwhelming opinion was that people wanted the 5th graders to stay at Mountain View, even if they had to squish in for the first month or make adjustments to the first month of school, which was really kind of heartwarming to know that we are in such a close-knit community in the part of town and the school that we're involved in.
So that's important to emphasize, and you guys have done a good job of this. It's been a total team effort with the parents, and the parents are fighting for this cause because you love Mountain View that much.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I mean, let's emphasize that the
Yes.
culture, the teachers, the
Yes.
charm, the intimacy.
It is a huge school that feels very small. I mean, it's I think the second largest.
the second one,
in
elementary
Albemarle.
school.
Yep, and it feels. I mean, the teachers know all the students, and the students are so nurtured and well taken care of when they're at school. It feels like a huge family.
Well, and it's one of the, not only is it the second largest, it's the most social and economically diverse
Right.
school in Albemarle County.
Brownsville's the
also.
largest, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Brownsville's
Yeah.
the largest. Their 5th graders never got threatened to get sent to middle school.
That's right. Brownsville's 5th graders stayed at Brownsville Elementary. So what did we, for those that are watching, we got CBS 19 and NBC 29 watching you guys here. What did you guys learn through this process of essentially being grassroots lobbyists?
Well, the
That's
first,
what you guys are here.
yeah, the first thing is I say thank you to both CBS and NBC because they very quickly ran stories
Right.
on it.
Yeah.
And Catherine, the Daily
Catherine-
Progress.
Yeah, the
And
Daily
Siva
Progress
Weekly,
did,
yeah.
Siva Weekly did a lot. It got picked up by a lot of people. I think one thing that was, we were talking about this a little bit before we came on air. One of the things is kind of a learning experience in this situation is prior to the pandemic, there was a discussion about pushing Bright Stars to Walton. I personally I'd never
Yeah, I
heard
didn't
about the
either.
issue, and neither did most other people. And there was somebody expressed a concern that was going to happen and nobody was going to say anything, and then all of a sudden the 5th graders were going to get moved, and in their words, some affluent parents were now mad, and now changes were happening. And when I heard that, my first instinct is I wanted to brush it off like a lot of people do. But then I started thinking about it more, that there's a truth to that, and not affluent necessarily as in rich and wealthy, because like I said, there's a whole diverse population at Mountain View, but they're people who were able to and knowing how to.
Affluent in knowledge.
Yeah, affluent in knowledge is probably the best way to say it. They knew how to go to the school board. They knew how to speak out to the superintendent. They knew how to call Jerry Miller, and they knew how to get on the news and stuff like that. And I think this is a learning experience to say that actually getting involved really truly works. A lot of people don't want to get involved, but I won't get into politics because this will be really easy. But the local political level is where you can actually make changes the most by
It's
getting
the
involved.
most important level of politics.
And it's the most important level. And it's the easiest influenced by parents, by students, by that kind of group.
What'd you learn, Jen?
I think that we kind of were able to hit the ground running and gain a lot of momentum and traction really quickly. That when people are passionate about something that affects their family or their kids, it's easy to come together for a common cause. And so, in the future, capitalizing on that initial passion, that momentum, and movement, I think is helpful and beneficial. I mean, this has been a super fast process. Obviously, we had a lot of time constraints because school's going to start here in like another month and a half or whatever it is. But I mean, realistically, it could have been drug whatever, like for months and months and months to the point that a decision was postponed or not made in time.
Well, and it's actually that working group. Anytime you put a working group together, there's pros and cons and frustrations and stuff. But I have to say, in the end, I thought it went really well. Mm-hmm. There has already been discussion of doing more like that when there's issues. I think Dr. Haas made the comment that in hindsight, a working group like this would have been put together probably last fall to head off the firestorm that ended up happening. Mm-hmm. Not to put words in his mouth, but there's a lot of times when you can, Cindy Wells, who was on the working group, she's the principal of Mountain View. Like she pointed out, possibly doing small working groups like that you bring outside stakeholders, you hit something really hard. People devoted, like I said, there was 23 members, and we started off an hour and a half, and then very quickly realized that wasn't enough and shifted to 2 hours, each week. Mm-hmm. Rosalind Schmidt, who is with the school system, did a fantastic job of getting real data. So it wasn't just an emotional decision. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of real data that got used. Pam Gardner got specific data she works at Mountain View. She got great data there. So you brought a bunch of stakeholders in together, very quickly kind of concentrated on what the problem was, came up with a solution, and now so. And I think that's a great model.
And I think people need to realize too that education in a small community, any community really, but especially a small one like Charlottesville, shouldn't just be relegated to people that have children within the school. Everyone should be concerned about education, because education for children opens so many doors to their future, is so important for, long-term prospects, whether they go to trade school, college, start working right after high school, whatever. Like, we all have a stake in what happens within our education system, whether you have children involved in the school or not.
So if you guys are just tuning in, the 5th grade is going to stay at Mountain View. Mm-hmm. And you've gotten a commitment on the 5th grade staying at Mountain View for, is it 2 years? So
the commitment is I would think long-term.
So perpetuity.
Because what we did is, by doing the portable building that gives 8 classrooms, is that should give us enough space to be able to handle the enrollment for this upcoming school year, the enrollment for next school year.
And the housing stock coming online?
And it should be, as long as the stuff stays in projection. And then the new building, the new addition that's supposed to be done in time for 3 school years from now.
Okay.
So my expectation is I don't think that temporary building is going to go anywhere, because like we talked about when I was here last time, that addition pretty much solves today's problem.
Right.
But that addition plus the 6 other buildings and stuff should at least, sooner or later, the answer is that there needs to be a new school.
It's going to be another school.
That's what
South Side.
Yeah, that's what the answer needs to be.
Are we close to that?
There's some.
Because there was a redistricting, and you guys know this more than I do, so that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
Albemarle County closed the Yancey.
Yeah.
In Scottsville.
Looking back, that's a pretty good decision.
He says that tongue in cheek. If you can't pick up the sarcasm via Pandora or Spotify. So the Yancey kids went to
They got split between Red Hill and Scottsville.
Red Hill and Scottsville.
And both of those schools got expanded because of that.
Right. So you're basically saying, and I'm getting out of your way now, that we need another one for Southside Albemarle. That would be Red Hill, Scottsville, Mountain View, and then a 4th.
Yeah, I almost feel like, possibly a working group for those 3 elementary schools combined wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, because you have so many neighborhoods, established neighborhoods, new neighborhoods, that, people need to have a voice in what these schools look like. Uh-huh. And if the school district is going to ever consider or talk about redistricting, then those parents need an opportunity to say, okay, this is how we want to build our school. This is
Sure.
what we would like that to look like in an ideal situation. And now how can we compromise?
Well, the really, I love having unpopular opinions, so I'm going to give you one. So there's
We can talk libertarian and ranked choice voting.
let's go.
I can go all day with you, Paul.
Jen,
and I know you can go all day with that.
Quickly, Jen would get up and leave. But no,
Bar over there.
I'll be over there.
So when we talk about redistricting, it's always, okay, let's try to shift this. And I understand the reason. I mean, I'm a realtor, so I understand people choose certain locations by school districts.
Sure. That's why Crozet boomed.
Yeah, well, and we aren't moving from, we've talked about moving, and we're not going to until our girls are at least done with Mountain View.
Okay.
So it happens for all the schools. What really needs to happen is when these new additional schools that have to be built get put in, the districts almost have to be drawn from scratch. Because if you just look at how the pie is cut and you see Brownsville and you see Mountain View and you go, okay, well, let's stick another school in the south side. Well, can we fill up two schools?
Yeah.
Or, so I really think when we add in, we're talking about a middle school and a high school up in North 29.
Yeah.
When that stuff gets put on there just has to be a blank map, and let's redraw the districts from the beginning, and that's gonna make people mad. I mean, people love their school, whatever school that is. People have a tendency to really like it, but this trimming around the edges stuff just doesn't work.
Sure,
all the
and
time.
we've seen that.
And we see it.
Let's get some props to the people watching. Jeannie Ballard is watching. She says, build a new school, several schools, all of Albemarle County Public Schools are meeting enrollment thresholds, more schools now. Kristen Jones giving you props, Sharon Fix giving you props, David Wilburn giving you props. 4 media outlets watching you, literally on the show. Patrick Powers giving you props over here. If you have questions or comments or props that you want to give to Jen and Paul, put it in the feed. What about, you said something I thought that was super poignant before the show started, that if you do not know how to play the game, and you guys have proven that you are ninjas at playing this game, and it's basically lobbying a school system to hear you, listen to the masses, and then carry out what you want. It's pretty much what happened there. If someone does not know how to play the game, whether it's parents of English as a second language student, which we have many in Albemarle County Public Schools, offer them some perspective or what you learned from all this.
Yeah, coming from a social work background, when we were talking about this before the show, is that, if you don't grow up being taught to how to advocate, how to access, the school board website, or how to access, how do you contact the media, or how do you do this or that? It's really intimidating and really challenging to do that, to feel comfortable at doing that. I mean, even for me, our one neighbor is a reporter for NBC, or she used to be our neighbor, and I sent her just constant Facebook messages.
Is that Josephine?
No, this is.
Did you also know Josephine?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're in that situation where you're unsure, ask someone. Reach out to someone, whether it's me or Paul or someone else you see in the community on the news, or there's a Charlottesville Community Chatter Facebook group, I think it's called. Ask on there. There's tons of people in Charlottesville. There were tons of people in our working group that reached out to people to help them get their voices heard in this situation. So ask. If you don't know, ask.
There's a difference between complaining and advocating.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of
Well
times,
said.
yeah, you can quote me.
I will steal that
But a lot of us will get together and we'll complain on the phone to each other or in groups, or you'll get a Facebook group, but and it wasn't us that started it. That very first meeting when they talked about moving Mountain View, I'm not sure exactly who did it, started like a private Facebook group.
Oh,
with
yeah.
everybody's fifth graders.
Yeah,
Was it Lori?
probably Janelle or
Carl. But man, I mean, that immediately got people started. And
Galvanized.
then,
Yeah.
and then it was,
And
people use the word lobbying as a bad thing because we all think of lobbying as, the big money
Federal
politics
government,
and stuff.
like cigarette lobbyers. This is different, what you're doing.
Yeah, a lobbying is like a group of people getting together and trying to push for some kind of change. It happens in all kinds of ways. Again, like we said earlier, is you have way more influence at the local government. I mean, you can, the school board member can sit
Yeah.
down and have coffee with you,
Yeah.
and you can have a discussion as opposed to.
I mean, I just went online and I didn't even know necessarily who our like local representatives were, so I Googled it and then sent them all emails.
She
And
said
then-
everybody.
I bet you did. I bet you did. I really bet you did.
My newest campaign is against the USPS for their.
Terrible service for mail. I mean, it's
I have
future.
already sent my Twitter or my tweets
You know,
to our
you-
local congressman about
You
that.
have the entrepreneurial bug. You're an entrepreneur. Maybe the next business is a lobbying firm. This is how you go about doing it, and people hire you as a consultant to get behind causes.
It's funny because what I laughed about this the most is like Jen usually tries to avoid politics. She tries to stay as far away from it as possible. Like I said, as soon as I start talking about it, because I love talking
Me
about
too,
it.
me too.
And she'll just get up and
She
go to
leaves
bed.
the room and goes to the.
She'll
My
go to the bar,
eyes
she'll
glaze over.
But
Oh, my wife and I.
But that's one of the things that's kind of I hope people learn from this is like that politics that you see on TV that nobody wants to be involved in. Like that's why you don't see all. You always wonder why there's not more awesome people running for all these. You don't want to. It's such a mess. You don't wanna be But like at the local level, it is seriously your neighbors, your friends.
Yeah.
There's an accountability that local people have to have because you literally see them.
Yeah, they're your neighbors.
Like Lloyd Snook just walked by while I was sitting here waiting to get on the
Right.
show. Like that local politics can be. I think it can be really fun.
I agree.
also.
I agree. Edith has given you some props here. Kristen Jones. I'm going to throw this to you. You have the Progress 2 watching. This is the toughest question I'm going to ask you guys. Do you feel like the process was handled in good faith with Albemarle County Schools?
My opinion, at the beginning, no. I think there was a little bit of that smoke and mirrors that we talk about kind of thing, but because of some of the stuff, because of the media attention that it got, because of some hard questions asked to Dr. Haas and stuff like that, I can remember being in the working group, the very first working group. They had a consultant running it, so there was a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I know there were a lot of parents who were watching the live stream, and there was a lot of us in the group that were.
We just wanted to get to work.
Yeah, we're really irritated, and we're like, this is not. And there was a few of us that are like, it is not going to go this way.
You've got parents chiming in. I will get to these comments. Before we do, why don't I get to the comments now, because there's a lot coming in. Sharon says, it was so helpful that the McCarters, as well as other parents, did not let the conversations die down during the waiting period. They supplied emails and suggested things you could share with the powers that be. As someone who did not know where to begin, it was hugely helpful.
Yeah, and I will say, like, we in our Facebook group that was put together for this purpose of getting ourselves kind of organized, there were several parents that kind of gathered all the data, put it in a letter format so that people could then kind of pick and choose what they wanted to include in their own emails to different people.
Sure.
And that was really helpful to have those more data-minded individuals or people that were able to write really concise and well-written letters to use as emails that we could then share with, even different people. I mean, we had, different members of our neighborhood writing emails and letters.
That didn't even have kids
to
involved.
give them that letter and say, these are the points that we're that we're focusing on.
And that's between Jen and I, we're gonna say it probably 100 times. And this was in no way the Paul and Jen show.
Yeah. So
There were tons of people involved, people who weren't that didn't have kids in the schools, but they could see that it was a problem.
Yeah.
People who have fought fights like this before. We even had people who were reaching out to us that live in different states who had previously been on school boards, and they're like, make sure when you do your letter, you don't just complain. You say some clear stuff and try to keep it. So there was a lot of advice and stuff that was given to us, because this is probably the first time I've taken on
civic engagement.
Well, no, to this kind of level. I mean, I've gone and spoke at planning commissions about neighborhoods being developed and stuff. I've done that, but this is probably the first time I jumped in to this level.
So Johnny Ornalis, his wife is a teacher, has shared the show. So is Alex Erpy. So is your friend Ray Cadell. Here's a question coming in from a mom. Her name is Jennifer, and her kids go to Henley. She says, we need the McCarters now more than ever. Would they consider using their strong voices with critical race theory and or transgender conversations that are happening inside schools at Albemarle County now?
So
Are you following it?
a little bit. I mean, we've been consumed by this, but
Because this is the next level for
Right.
your
And
daughters.
Right.
Your daughters are in elementary school.
Yeah.
This is a middle school thing that's happening.
And this is the
Henley's parents are recruiting you to help out on this. This is amazing. What's happening here.
So the first school board.
There's some irony there.
I would have
Don't you
to-
think?
Yeah, because
Because that would not have happened. You see what I'm saying? There's some irony there.
I need to educate myself more, especially on the critical race theory piece, because I wouldn't want to speak on that until
That's
I
fair.
understood it wholly.
Sure.
But I'll tell you, just from a very outside perspective on that, we were trying to speak at the school board meeting. The first
oh
time.
my God,
And man,
Crozet,
Henley, we were nothing. Like
They
in
were
terms
on
of
it.
like being there and speaking and stuff like that. Man, they were on
we
it better
actually
than we were.
commented we need to get them on our team because they had so many
So many
people
numbers.
speaking
Yeah.
at the school board meeting.
I mean, but you know what though? Here's the thing that I'll say is it's great to see.
Yeah.
No matter what side of the equation you're on. Like, I mean, critical race theory is a whole nother kind of conversation, because we were pretty.
I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this.
Well, we were pretty lucky because almost everybody, when we gave them the facts of our situation, I didn't have anybody that goes, you know what, knowing all the information you have, I think they should go to Walton.
Right.
Like there's nobody that we
Yours is
encountered
much
that.
more clean cut and
Yeah.
Yes.
straightforward.
The critical race theory.
I mean, because yours is basically this. Should fifth graders be in middle school with much older kids that can bully them?
With a 2
much
hour
longer window of
with no
school.
playground.
Yeah.
Like no.
And no library.
Which actually
It'd be the only school in the school system.
Well, which actually is the one thing I'll say about our situation is, so at the end of the day, the recommendation we had was bring in a temporary building and tough it out till that comes, right? Guess what was said the very first day when it was announced that they were thinking about sending our kids to Walton?
What's that?
Everybody was like, "Why don't we get a temporary building?" And like
Common sense.
We went. It took us a month to get to a thing that probably should have already been decided. Like it really
Which should have been decided last year.
Yeah, no,
by the school board.
And
And your summer would have been much more relaxed.
I mean, I had fun, but critical race theory is totally different.
Yeah.
Because
That's much more heated.
Because there's people that see pros and cons on both sides, and there's not some overwhelming. This is the easy right answer. My opinion on
need a
critical race
working
theory is they need a working group is the concept of what is trying to be done. I'm very much behind. I've seen examples that kind of make me a little uneasy about stuff, but the overarching goal of it, I'm not against. I think, and it's a benefit that we have at Mountain View. Mountain View is so diverse that we have had to have conversations with our kids super early, and that's the way we've done it. When they ask a question, we answer it, and we've even had
Like what are examples?
So
This is what I have to look forward to.
okay. I'll give you one it's a funny example I have, and this is definitely not parenting by Paul McCarter, because trust me, I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Neither do I.
But one of the funny moments I remember is my daughter, who's now 10.
Okay.
She was
This is your
probably
youngest?
no, she's my
Oldest.
oldest.
Okay.
She was probably 4, I think,
Okay. Wow.
4 or 5, and we were driving around, and I got home. She went to some home inspections with me and some other stuff because she couldn't go to school that day. And Jen asked when we got, so what did y'all talk about in the car? I said, we talked about Doc McStuffins, we talked about this, we talked about what a hermaphrodite is. And Jen's like, what? And I said, well, it just kind of came up in conversation. And she's like, well, you're going to need to like walk me through how this conversation with a 4-year-old got to that. And really, it turned into, she had a friend in her class who had 2 mommies.
Okay.
So that turned into, well, can somebody have 2 mommies? What about 2 daddies? What about this? Okay, can somebody love a girl? Can a girl love a girl? And then she turned in, she's like, can somebody be both a boy and a girl? And I was like, well, physically, that's a hermaphrodite. So it progressed, and she was following along.
Wow.
And when we start talking and you can kind of see them not following along, then you're probably getting in a little bit too much. But we've had conversations. We've had some really tough conversations about
and
race
I think
and stuff.
too, and that's because we at dinner like to talk about stuff, and I think that people need to remember that kids don't. I mean, yes, you need to keep things age appropriate, but kids don't shy away from the tough conversation. It's often that the parents are uncomfortable having those conversations with their kids.
Sure.
So, if you take the time to think about how you're going to say it in an age appropriate way, and sit down. I mean, our kids we talk about the Civil War all the time, and slavery, and what that, like our daughter is very into history, so we do a lot of stuff like that, which leads to a lot of, natural conversations about race and inequality and whatnot.
So the transgender conversations in the middle school?
So again, I think that's really heated, and especially, again, I'm a social worker.
Right.
So
That's why I asked. You have a lot of perspective you can offer here.
Right, and I also have friends who have transgender children.
Yeah.
To me,
You didn't know we were going down this, did you?
Well, this is the Henley parents front here, okay?
I think in any situation you have to look at, am I reacting because this is something that makes me personally uncomfortable, and I have a personal disagreement, or it goes against my personal belief system, versus what is in the overall best interest for children maybe who are different than my children.
Okay, I'm with you.
And so for
Do you think
me,
people projecting?
we all do that. Like
Yeah.
everybody does that. We look at the world through a lens of our own belief system. I mean, that is just how the
And your
world.
own, everybody's biased.
Well said.
Everybody is.
Everyone has a bias. I teach a class on macro policy and a clinical practicum course, and we talk about all that every semester. Is everyone is biased in some way. If you are saying that you aren't, then you're lying to yourself. We all have them.
Well, that's the same.
Well said, Jeff.
So I'm the way I call myself is I'm a libertarian leaning moderate.
Okay.
That's why I like to say myself.
Probably somewhere there.
So from my way that I
Socially
look at
liberal,
stuff.
Fiscally conservative?
Yeah,
Is that
very
you?
much. That's me.
That's me too.
That's the majority of people.
Yeah, that's the majority of people.
yeah.
Why can't
So-
we align with the party?
We could do another show. We could do another show on that.
So mean.
I struggle a lot of times with looking at things and saying, "Oh, of course that's the way it is." Like, I'm definitely not going to pump up the Libertarian Party because that thing's a train wreck sometimes, or most of the time.
All of them are.
But like that.
And we don't want Jen to leave.
Let
Let her stay.
there's been a push from the beginning of like the Libertarian Party, just use that from the 70s to same-sex marriage. Like there's a way that I look at things to where most of the time the problem is there is systematic problems.
Yeah.
And you can either try to fix the systematic problems or you can just get rid of some of the system. Kind of thing. That'll be the end of my political speech.
Yeah.
But no, so like I sometimes struggle with, okay, is the public schools the appropriate place to teach certain things? And I would like to say no, that should be the role of the parents to teach. But then I know a lot of parents who don't teach it. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, okay, well then it does cause issues at the school, and it does. So that's a roundabout way of saying this critical race theory and stuff like that is it's not
very
an easy answer.
Like would it bother me as a parent if there was gender neutral bathrooms at a school? No. Because it wouldn't bother me as a person. Can I see the other side of that?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what's missing in a lot of that's what's missing a lot of these discussions.
Yeah.
That's empathy.
Yes.
Empathy is what's missing.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
More comments coming in for you guys. Rick Mangione is giving you guys some props. Andre Xavier, who owns Seville Hop on Tour, is giving you some props right now. This question is coming in from Lauren. Jerry, please ask your guests how close they were to pulling their daughters from Mountain View for a private school experience, or were they close at all?
We had the discussion, but I would say we weren't close. I mean, my attitude was kind of, we will make the best of whatever the situation ends up being.
Okay.
So from my perspective, I would say no. Paul might feel differently.
So this will be enough. So you talk about school choice, right?
Yeah.
You hear school choice is a big buzzword and stuff like that. And people say, oh, school choice is bad. Well, school choice already exists for certain people. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate. We have talked about moving from where we live currently anyways. So I would say that my discussion was not as much about taking our kids and putting them in private school.
Okay.
Mine was more like, well,
we could move.
we might as well move.
Yeah.
Like the only thing holding us here is we want our kids to go to Mountain View.
Yeah.
Well, if we're losing that,
What's keeping us?
like,
Right.
go, yeah. So
where would you would have stayed in Albemarle?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
she says yes.
Very much
What I-
associated with the area.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think there's a lot of pluses. I love Albemarle, obviously, in the city, but Greene County has
Oh, yeah.
some great things. I mean, so like I personally am not necessarily as tied to that we would have to be
I like
in
close to
Albemarle.
downtown.
I know you do.
It's like
So-
an $8 Uber ride.
Yeah, it's not bad.
So there,
I like to have a cocktail and an Uber home.
yeah.
Why?
So if you're asking about Paul's opinion, that's where the whole 7/8 come in. That
Yeah.
like I got 1/8
All
of
right,
the
so
decision.
you're not leaving Albemarle.
We're not leaving
You're
Albemarle. We're not leaving the South Side.
And it's hard, I love the South Side. It's almost like when we first moved here, people thought we lived in the boonies. Like no one wants to go past the jail there, but now it's such the
Wegmans
area
effect.
has grown up. But people on the South Side tend to be really close with their neighbors, have close-knit neighborhoods.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
like
everyone does, but-
Avon Street extended, all the
Yeah.
neighborhoods there. But it's funny how things bring neighborhoods together. So part of the reason that like I feel like the Avon Street extended is kind of close to those neighborhoods is because a few years ago the county was trying to make another bonehead decision, was going to put like a transfer station there on Mill Creek, and that brought
people
all the
did not-
neighborhoods.
yep.
So then all of a sudden, and then the next project that kind of spun out from that was a crosswalk, fight that happened. I mean, some of these fights you just like. It took years for us to fight. They're finally building it this summer to get a
school
crosswalk to Mountain View,
Yeah.
so kids can walk across.
No freaking brainer.
Like,
Just don't get
and it ended up costing. Oh my God, this libertarian's gonna come out. This it ended up costing. I think it's like I don't know how
like
many
a ridiculous,
hundreds,
like over
hundreds of
$500,000
thousands of dollars,
For a crosswalk.
and give me a can of paint.
$500,000.
You know.
Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
go out, we can
Like,
do it ourselves.
that's what I
in 2
said.
hours.
I'll go paint the lines.
For
and-
10K.
But they had to, it has to be the traffic studies, and VDOT
Yeah,
has to be
yeah.
approved, and it has to have flashing lights, and it has to have a change in the landscape. Oh, God.
But there are a lot of people that I've heard say that they would walk or bike to school, except for the fact that there hadn't been a crosswalk.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. This is an interesting one from Grayson, who's watching in Belmont. Has this problem been created by poor planning and a focus on too much housing for our area? This is an interesting question because this dude makes his living on housing.
So I will tell you.
And he's not a NIMBY. You're not a NIMBY.
No. Oh, no, I'm not.
You're a yes in my backyard.
I actually, yes. The not in my backyard mentality is probably one that irritates me more than anything.
And that's not you.
No. So the first part of his question is correct. It is
The
a
plan.
lack of planning.
Yeah.
I don't think there's different ways that you can approach having the schools ready. So the problem is we don't approach with the classrooms have to be ready for the students when they get there.
Right.
Instead, they have projections. And you remember, like, I was, shortly when this whole thing happened, I went to one of the community advisory things, and Donna Price,
Yeah.
Supervisor Price was there. And when it got brought up, she was like, oh, well, an expansion has already been approved. That isn't a solution to the problem.
Right.
And that's kind of a little bit of the mentality that's wrong. So, but looking at both sides of the coin, like, people don't want to pay for a half-full school. So if you say, okay, well, we're going to build this school now, it's only going to be half occupancy until these other neighborhoods, well, people don't want to spend the money for it.
Yeah.
Right now. So there is a little bit of that kind of fighting back and forth thing. But when you see Yancey get closed and you're like, man, maybe it's time to review, like, opening Yancey back up to, or something to relieve the pressure on these.
Well, and also, I think hopefully this illustrates that the Board of Supervisors and the school board need to be having
They need to talk.
actual conversations.
Right.
Well, so Wendell Wood, everybody, mention Wendell Wood's name to the Board of Supervisors.
United Land Company.
Yeah, United Land
Wendell Wood.
Company.
The largest landowner in Elmore County is Wendell Wood.
Yeah, like he has a project that this is the whole not in my backyard that I'm not for. Like in off of Highway 20, he's got a big project that he wants to build.
Talking 20 South?
We're talking about a lot of houses. That's the number one thing our area needs is just more housing, and it needs
More
to be
rooftops.
needs to be cheaper housing.
Yeah.
And the county does everything they can to say they care about affordable housing, and then
A $450,000
Yeah.
townhome is not affordable
but
housing.
then they'll object to attempts to actually make affordable housing because it's not pretty enough, or it's not this, or it's not that.
I heard this crazy stat, this is up your alley, that, and let's just do easy numbers, a $400,000 home,
Mm-hmm.
of a $400K home, 24% of the cost of home is tied to bureaucracy and red tape
Oh, yeah.
from the municipality.
Oh, yeah.
So one of our clients is a developer, is a home builder, and he said literally a quarter of every house we build is tied to paperwork, red tape, licenses,
Well-
and mumbo jumbo.
Well, there was so Galaxy Farms is a neighborhood being developed in the south side off of 20, just down from Mill Creek. And Nicole Scroll was
Oh, yeah.
she was the developer for it. She's now sold the project, but it was a fantastic
Yeah, it was
project.
real nice.
It was going to have it was going to be really dense on this side of the area so that she could do these little cottages.
Right?
Like 800, 900 square foot little cottages that were going to be perfect for a first-time home buyer or perfect for an elderly person downsizing, something like that. And going through the review process for the county,
Was a nightmare.
it just screwed, and all of a sudden, like, it basically killed it.
Right.
And when you see, I'll give another great one. So, it's going to sound like I'm a libertarian fighting for taxes. This is gonna
Neil
sound
Williamson's
really weird.
watching. He
Yeah.
says, hashtag more housing everywhere for everyone.
So-
Free enterprise forum.
So VDOT won't take over public roads, or won't take over roads. So all these neighborhoods getting built all have private roads, right? And it's like, oh, look at us, we're saving our taxes, or whatever. But what ends up happening is now HOAs have to be done.
Right.
So if you have a $100 HOA because you have to pay for the resurfacing of your road and all that kind of stuff, well, that's the equivalent of your house being like $20,000 more.
Yeah.
So then you also have the fun that, like, I live in a neighborhood where I have private roads. We have an HOA that has to pay for it. Oh, but I'm also paying taxes that guess whose roads it's paying for? All the other old neighborhoods. So there's things that the county does, and it's not just the county, the city, all of them do it. You know, having this, you got to have all this green space. Well, that means you have less density. The only way to make affordable housing is to make cheaper, dense housing.
Well, what do you think of
Period.
this? And Sharon's saying preach. So she's giving you some props. Guys, we won't get to all these comments here. I'm going to wrap up with this question for them. And then we go to Alex Erpy, J-Dubs. What do you think of are you following the zoning, upzoning the city is considering?
Yeah.
Through the Siebel plans together, consultancy?
Yep. Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. Now,
Do you have a take on that? You have a take on a lot of stuff here.
I'm a supporter of
I like it.
I'm a supporter of ADUs, accessory dwelling
Yeah,
units.
me too.
Because an ADU makes two affordable houses.
Right.
It makes the unit itself is affordable, and then that provides rental income for the owner, so it makes the other house more affordable.
Well said.
I'm all for those. I do think there's limitations. I do think, and parking is always a big deal. Like, I mean, if you start trying to turn, housing some of these neighborhoods into 4 units, there's not the parking and stuff. And then then you got to make sure the schools are ready for it. So, like, it's not, I don't think it's an awful idea in total, but there's definitely some limitations that need to be done with it. But I think ADUs is a great example to help the affordable housing stuff. I mean, you see it in Bellevue.
Oh, yeah.
Not Bellevue.
Belvedere?
Belvedere, sorry.
Yeah.
Belvedere.
Give us something incredibly poignant again.
Oh, that's her. Poignant stuff is her.
Yeah.
I think that we need to give a huge round of applause to all the parents, the teachers, the admins from the school board, Dr. Haas, all these people that came together to come up with solutions for this scenario. A lot of people worked really hard and worked together to, just to care for our kids. And I think that we all need to give those people a round of applause for the work.
Applause noise making here. Oh,
look at that. That works.
You guys are awesome. I really enjoy your energy and your stick-to-itiveness and your hustle. You guys are A+ people.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously.
And we thank you and NBC and CBS and
Daily Progress.
Siebel Weekly
Siebel
and Daily
Weekly.
Progress as well for their help in getting the word out. I mean, definitely I don't know that we would have been where we are now without the support of the local media.
Sure.
And I'll say something that
It's our pleasure.
you would never expect to hear out of my
Okay.
mouth.
You're not
So,
going to say more taxes.
no.
I don't think you would ever say that.
But I am going to say thank you to Dr. Haas, though.
Okay.
Because
Wow.
there
was some friction
having,
at one point.
completely.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said. He could have looked through the working group and went, you know what? But looking at all the data, we're pushing through with this. He didn't have to establish a working group. He could have just brushed off. So there is something to be said for Dr. Haas and his team being willing to
Yeah.
change direction
Listen.
Pivot.
and to pivot. Pivot.
It's the word.
Yeah.
Pivot is the word.
Good
Yeah.
word. Did we get a good photo of this couple here, J-Dubs?
How we can do better?
We did.
Yeah.
We did,
Nice.
and we would love to get a pic. Thank you for joining us.
Hey,
Thank you.
always a pleasure.
Thank
Anytime.
you.
If you want to start that libertarian moderate podcast, you let me know.
Ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Hey, Fair Vote Virginia is a good organization.
But yeah, Sally's behind that, right?
Sally, yeah. I was a little disappointed that she didn't bring it to the floor, but Toscano before her brought ranked choice voting, at least to committee. I never made it to the floor.
I'm a huge fan of RCV.
Oh,
Ranked choice
100%.
voting. J-Dubs
So is
gonna
Jen.
get the pick. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
you so much.
Are the mics hot?
Oh, the mics are still on.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
on?
I'm still gonna do the show.
Okay, so I'm not
here.
going to say anything bad.
Can I get a picture
It was a
of them?
pleasure. We're saying hi.
Thank you, guys. Let's get this beautiful couple. Very, very nicely done. Alex Erpy is about 30 seconds away. Thank you guys for joining us.
Hey,
We appreciate you. Take care. J-Dubs, I'm going to Skype Alex as we speak, and we'll get some insight on the markets here on the show. So tomorrow's program, we let you know first on this network that Bodo's Bagels is going to stop doing its drive-through. But Bodo's Bagels is now considering a fourth location that is drive-through focused. I have more on that tomorrow on the I Love Seville show. I got to go market talk, though. We got Alex Erpy on the line, Judah Wickhauer. If we can get Alex into the program. Que pasa, Alex? How are you, my friend? I'm doing very well. You got big shoes to follow here with Paul and Jen. You always rise to the occasion. Alex Erpy is the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. And Alex and his dad Xavier host Today y Mañana Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love Seville network. So Alex, I'm going to follow your lead, my friend, today, and I want to talk markets. I want to talk the 3-day weekend. I want to talk the jobs report. A lot we want to cover. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I mean, it's funny. The markets are very interesting today because they were reaching those all-time highs, and then obviously they're testing the waters there. Oil is now at a 6-year high, which is interesting to see. I mean, talk about a complete 180. I mean, this time last year we were talking oil approaching negative pricing because people literally had to pay to get it off their hands, and now we're back at a 6-year high there. So just goes to show, I think, just the volatility of certain things like oil, like commodities, and also with the markets, that you have to always keep in mind that the markets will test it. They always say that the markets go up like a escalator and down like an elevator. So you always have to watch those little testing points and just evaluate your position and make sure that you're in a good place.
We saw lumber go to all-time highs during COVID. It's now dropped considerably, the cost of lumber. We see fuel, and we're all feeling this pain at the gas pump, now upticking. I think a lot of us are thinking it's going to continue upticking throughout the rest of the year. Is that what you see happening?
I mean, certainly there doesn't seem to be much that will prevent it from upticking or staying where it is throughout the summer. I mean, the summer is always the most expensive time for gas, historically, gas prices at the pump. So I would expect that to continue in the summer. Whether oil, it's tough to say for the rest of the year and going into next year, just because so much of oil demand depends on the rest of the world. I mean, the question is, what are we going to see out of the rest of the world? What are we going to see out of Europe? I mean, if our demand and supply gets back into alignment, will we then have a demand increase out of Europe once they get going? Because they're definitely lagging behind where we are in terms of reopening, in terms of the United States. So will we see changes in Europe out of India, which obviously has been lagging in reopening, given the high caseload that they have there? So I think there's a lot of questions worldwide in terms of oil, but certainly in the summer, there's not much of an indication that anything's going to change there. Lumber is interesting. Go for it.
Go ahead.
Lumber is interesting because I think that's a good lesson. I mean, Xavier last week was tweeting multiple times about the power of the consumer, and lumber is one of those really interesting things that you see the price of lumber spike because of supply constraints, but then you see, in this case, the consumers of lumber being contractors, people who build homes, developers, adjusting their own behavior in response to the increase, and now the price of lumber is declining again, coming back in line because people have adjusted their behavior to it.
So he's exactly right. So this is what happened from a layman's perspective. Alex Erpy, CEO of Emergent Financial Services, is the expert. From what I saw during COVID, people were staying home more than ever because we're quarantining at the house. As we started quarantining at the house, mom and dads, grandmas and grandpas, whatever it may be, they saw all the projects they wanted to do at home. Some of those projects required lumber, or they realized that their home needed to be more dynamic than ever, so they considered expanding the deck, maybe building a side deck, maybe building a 3-4 seasons room type deal because they were at the house more than ever. So as people started these home improvement projects at home, the cost of lumber started upticking, supply and demand. Demand was high, supply wasn't keeping up with demand, so the cost of goods, lumber, started going through the roof. As it got so expensive, those home improvement projects and those new construction projects stopped and went offline. So the consumer chose to vote against lumber with its dollar, and that's how we as consumers vote, with our hard-earned income. And as the consumer, the builder, the subcontractor said no, then lumber started dropping in price. This is Xavier Yerpe to a T of what happened.
Exactly. It's economics 101, but I think sometimes we have a tendency to forget it when we're looking at the macro picture. We're like, oh my goodness, lumber prices increasing, inflation can sometimes appear to be this amorphous thing where it's like, oh, it exists by itself and there's nothing we can do about it. But in reality, inflation is merely a supply and demand. It's a supply and demand situation, and it can appear in different ways in different industries. And so there's always going to be a reaction to it. So we had the really supply shock, but then demand just reacted and said, well, we're not going to do as many projects, we're not going to build as many new homes if this is the price of lumber.
The talented and intelligent Xavier Yerpe tweets again today about employment, and this is something that I was going to relay to you. He says, U.S. service providers expanded in June by less than forecast as a measure of employment contracted, reflecting employers' struggles to attract workers. Are we at full employment? No. So what's holding workers back? Then he says, guess. Then he hashtags Today y Mañana and Emergent Financial Services. Xavier Yerpe, this was an incredibly well-crafted tweet, my friend. And if Nicholas had any influence on this tweet and the formatting of this tweet, you did a hell of a job as well, Nicholas Yerpe.
I think my father, actually, his tweets are 100%.
Oh, they are!
Mine. They are, because he goes on. So we have Bloomberg system, which obviously is how we do a lot of the research for our clients, and he's always reading new information there, and he goes straight from Bloomberg to the Twitter and puts out what he's been reading and thinking.
Well done, Xavier. So employment, are we at full employment? No. What's holding workers back? I don't think it's the unemployment benefits anymore. I think what's happened is, and I'm going to get out of your way here, I think what's happened with food and beverage, with hospitality, they're short-staffed because personnel has found new careers. They're doing new stuff at better times of day. Instead of working in a 110-degree kitchen to 3 in the morning, they found new careers because of COVID. And the second thing, and I hate to say this, I think some of these jobs may never come back because they've been cannibalized by digital and the internet and efficiencies like Zoom, where maybe, and I think you've brought this up on previous interviews, the need for an admin or a secretary or a greeter at an office may not be as great as it once was if these businesses are instead doing interviews like this from their desk virtually with the people they're chatting with at their desk. They're not going to someone's office to wait in a waiting room to have to greet an admin or a secretary. That's just one example. Alex, the show is yours. What do you think?
I think it's a combination of what you're describing. I definitely think, I do believe some people have changed industries, and that's why certain industries are being impacted more than others, particularly food and beverage, I think. On the other hand, I think also the heightened unemployment enables people, and I know this from just anecdotally, I know of some people who basically, while they're considering a different career or laying the groundwork for a different career, are basically able to do that because they're receiving an unemployment check at this point that is so significant that there really is no incentive to work while they're doing that. In other words, maybe if you had thought of a career change in the past, you would say, well, I'm going to continue with this stepping stone job until my new career, I'm ready to go for it. And now you would sit there and say, well, why bother with a stepping stone job that's paying me $40,000 a year when I could get $30,000 a year employed and still be pursuing, have even more time to think about my new career. And I know some people who have taken that track. And so I think that's probably the reason, that's kind of why I see food and beverage being impacted so highly, because traditionally in America, and obviously when times are bad, you have people working in food and beverage that don't want to be working there. They're underemployed in the sense of, given their education level and what
that's the job they could find.
They should be working. Exactly. Yeah. It's the only job they could find.
Yeah.
But traditionally, if you look at the history of food and beverage, those are stepping stone jobs. In other words, you don't go into, being a waiter or at a food and beverage industry there with the idea of, well, I'm going to be a waiter my entire life. You do this, make some money while you're pursuing a different kind of career. So to the extent that a higher unemployment check monthly, $300 extra, comes in there and says, well, don't bother with the stepping stone job, you can get almost as much by staying at home and just go for your other career. I think a lot of people have probably taken that track, and that's probably why we've seen that kind of food and beverage industry being most impacted, because the margins there are very difficult for them. I mean, we know so many small business owners in food and beverage. Those are industries where the margin between profit and loss is very slim. So they don't really have a lot of leeway to say, well, I can compete with $300 a month more to do nothing. In other words, just $300 a month of unemployment isn't just $300 more in your pocket. It's $300 a month plus time. Because the time that you would have been working, you are now at home. And a small business owner in food and beverage can't compete with that kind of increase in wages and time.
Well said. Well said. Alex Erpy, Emergent Financial Services. Think Emergent Financial Services, guys, for your wealth planning and your financial education, financial needs. So I want to throw this to you. The Dow Jones going into today's open, the Dow was going into the open after logging a fourth straight positive session this past Friday. The S&P was on a 7-day winning streak. The NASDAQ ended Friday on a record close. So this past Friday was gangbusters. Absolute gangbusters. Now, we're cooled a little bit today, but still performing extremely well over the last 60 days or so. Let me throw investing in a market like this. One thing I've learned from Alex, one thing I've learned from Xavier, from Nick, from Michael, and from Mrs. Erpy is now is always the time to invest into the market. Invest into the market. We are investing at really high levels here. Really high levels. Offer some perspective at investing at levels that are essentially record levels for the indices here.
The key is always going to be consistency there. And so when we always say now is the time to invest, typically, like most people, when they invest, you're investing as your paycheck comes in, you have a certain amount that you say, I'm going to save this. You typically don't accumulate, $10,000 and say, now I'm going to put it all in one shot. So as long as you're consistently investing, right, you're going to be investing at times when the market is extremely high like now. You may be investing a part of it a month from now. And after the market maybe has gone down 10%. We have no idea what's going to happen. But you're always getting in. And we did a study, I think we did this. We did it originally in 2019, updated it last year. And the difference by missing so if you were invested in the S&P 500, but you missed the top 10 days in like a 10-year time span, your annualized return went from about 13% a year to 10% a year. You shaved 3% off your entire return by missing 10 days. So if you sit there and say 365 times 10 years, you're talking thousands of days. And missing 10 of those days costs you about 3% annually in return. So the key is just to be in it. Because you're going to have bad days, right? Sometimes you're going to be investing and it's going to look high. But there's no telling when one of those big days in the Dow or the S&P 500 is going to come. It could come at the top of a peak where we sit there and say, wow, this is a really high market. But then the next day is one of those 10 best days of the entire decade. And you sit there and say, I waited and I missed out on one of those days. And now, I might invest a week later when it's slightly down, but you missed out on one of the major days that you could have been invested. So the consistency is what the key of what drives that return.
So we'll talk a specific position here. I own a fair amount of NVIDIA. Okay? And NVIDIA, for those that don't know, NVIDIA designs and sells graphics and video processing chips for desktop, notebook gaming PCs, workstations. NVIDIA involved in cars and vehicles. You need these chips to make sure the cars and vehicles are functioning in this 2021 environment. So NVIDIA, over the last 30 days, has gone from sub 700 a position to I think now it's at 824 and change. So we got a stock over the last 30 days that is incredibly outperforming and doing extremely well. Your mindset investing into a company like NVIDIA, where you look at the 30-day chart and you see, good Lord, you see like a 15% uptick in value in a 30-day period for a position like NVIDIA. Does that or should that scare you away for investing into a stock that's red hot?
There's always two kind of methods that are this, and I've known big time momentum investors where their philosophy has been that's exactly what you want to do. As a stock is going up, that's when you want to be putting your investments in little by little. Now, some people do believe in one way to approach that, because again, when I'm talking being in the market, I'm talking a diversified portfolio across many stocks. But if you're talking a specific stock, one very common method is you use dollar cost averaging. And what that basically is saying is you're going to take your position that you want to be in. Let's say you want to be in $3,000 in NVIDIA, and you want to put that in. You can sit there and say, well, I'm going to go in 1,000, a third of my position now. If NVIDIA climbs, great. I'll put in another position. If NVIDIA declines, well, now I have the opportunity to buy my second tranche, my second position at a lower price, right? So instead of investing all 3,000 at one time, you're basically saying I'm going to split my investment up into 3 or 4 pieces, and I'm going to go in one at a time. And the key is just never to allow that our behavioral instincts as people to get in the way of that plan, because there are going to be times when you're going to put your first tranche in, right? Invest 1,000 out of your 3,000 in NVIDIA. NVIDIA climbs another 10%, and our human nature is to sit there and say, I should have put the whole thing in, because then my whole investment would have been up 10%. But you have to sort of counteract that with the understanding that if NVIDIA had taken a small correction, a 10% correction, you would have been then positioned to put in a second tranche into that. So that's a very common way to approach a market like this. Because instead of putting all your money in one basket time-wise, right? Because you often hear people talk about don't put all your eggs in one basket, and they're usually talking about a stock. But you also see it from a time perspective. Don't put all your eggs in one basket on a certain day. Put some of your eggs in on a Friday. Then put some of your eggs in 2 weeks from now. And put some of your eggs in 3-4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now. And that way could you miss out on a massive gain?
But you're hedging your risk.
Right? But you're investing. You're somewhat invested, but that's the risk you take, and instead you're giving yourself an opportunity that if NVIDIA declines, you can go in with a second tranche of your investment.
The new social media ninja in the family might be Xavier Yerpe. Xavier Yerpe is watching the feed and offering questions. I love this, Xavier Yerpe. I love you, Xavier Yerpe. He says, if so many countries have yet to get going, why is oil so high? Why is the cost of a barrel of oil so much?
That is a great question, and part of it is often comes down to expectations. Can have a huge impact on. So prices is often not just especially when you're talking oil, because so much of oil is in futures contracts. So in other words, the price of oil we're seeing is heavily dependent on what people think oil is going to be in the future. So it could be oil purchasers are sitting there saying, well, I think things are going to get better 6 months from now, so I want my oil. I want to buy oil now. You could be sitting in a scenario where maybe the supply.
Still got him?
People had to put a hold on how much oil they were pumping out last year because of what they were doing. Have they fully returned?
Okay, we lost you briefly during that. Can you give us the last 10 seconds? You were dropping. I could hear you, but I don't think the listeners could. Can you go over the last 15 seconds of what you just said?
Sure. The last 15 seconds was on the supply side, in the sense of you also have to take a look at did the producers of oil change the way how much they were producing given last year, and have they yet to ramp back up where they need to be? And conversely, as opposed to the demand side, are people purchasing oil now? The major buyers, the major purchasers of oil, are they purchasing it now because they expect higher demand in the future?
I think that's what it is.
It would not surprise me. That's very common with commodities. One thing you always have to think about with things like oil, because so much of that happens on a futures, meaning you're buying oil today to be delivered to you 60, 90 days from now. So you can push up the price of oil today because you're buying it today because you don't want to have to buy it at a more expensive price in the future. That's how you get your classic inflation things, even with bread, right? You buy extra bread today because you think it might be more expensive tomorrow. but you really just pushed up the price of bread today.
Exactly.
So, and that can happen with oil as well.
Well, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong. You get somebody who's very wealthy and has a lot of resources. Can they buy so much oil today with the intention of driving up the price of oil down the road and then winning the margin battle because they bought it today and not down the road?
It's difficult to do.
Okay.
Because of just how much demand, how much production there is for one person to try to corner. It's called cornering the market, is the classical term for it. It's difficult to do. B, I think by the time someone was making enough purchases to even approach attempting that, the regulators would be after them because you can't actually legally attempt to corner the market anymore. So my suspicion is at the point at which you were actually on the verge of succeeding at doing that as a speculator, somebody would step in and say you're trying to corner the market and this is not permitted.
Fantastic. Alex Erpy, CEO, Emergent Financial Services. This is the firm you guys want, managing your wealth and giving you the knowledge and education you need to grow your portfolio. My friend, Thursday at 10:15, Today y Mañana. What can we expect?
Oh, it's going to be a fun one. We have a very artistic show for you this time. Nick has done his great work in bringing us more local artisans. So the first we're going to have Daniel and Elisa Foytik. They're from Foytik Leather. He's an immigrant from Siberia.
Ooh.
That came here and from his experience there making his own leather goods and toys to play with because it was such a poor area. He's now doing the same thing here in our area, producing leather goods himself by hand here in Charlottesville. And then we're also going to be joined by Kate Thomas, and she's a local artist here in Charlottesville. So a very artistic show for Today Mañana. That's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
I would love to see Xavier do some art on Today y Mañana. We almost got him singing the opera on the Vitae Spirits Day. Can he do some art?
Haven't we been close? I mean, he almost danced when we had Edwin Rowe on. He almost sang for the opera, and now we're going to see. I mean, maybe we can get him to tell us about his secret painting skills or something like that.
Oh, does he have painting skills?
No, he doesn't. But maybe he hasn't told me about them.
Okay, Xavier Erpy. I love the
Maybe he has a
Erpys.
secret skill.
I love this family so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know this family of guys in this studio. I'm very excited to see you on Thursday, Alex. All the best. You're amazing. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. We feel the same way. Take care.
You have a good one.
You too.
Bye. Alex Erpy, boys and girls, A+ people right there. Emergent Financial Services, I can't emphasize it enough for you. Emergent Financial Services is where it's at. If you're looking for some guidance, some knowledge for wealth building in your financial portfolio, this is where it's at, and it's not even close. That's the show. If you're just tuning in now, you will see this all over the news, print, radio, and television. The 5th grade at Mountain View is going to stay at Mountain View. They are not going to be sent to Walton or to a middle school experience. They're going to stay at Mountain View. That is good news for everybody at Mountain View. Jen and Paul were amazing. MacArthur, Alex Erpy's A+ people. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk Bodo's, and Bodo's looking for a 4th location that's drive-through only. I have some ideas for Bodo's for a drive-through only location. That's the program. Thank you for joining us on a Tuesday. My name is Jerry Miller. Take care.